Hello, everybody, and welcome to Artificial Intelligence Preparing for the Future. We've got a great lineup here, and so I'd just like to start by asking each of our panelists to introduce themselves before we get into the questions. And speaking of questions, I expect this is an area of great interest to many of you today. And so I'm really encouraging you to come forward with your questions. They can be fast, they can be forensic, or they can be furious. It's up to you, but please just bring them on. Thank you. So, Alan, would you like to start just by introducing yourself?
Sure. My name's Alan Porter. I'm the Director of Product Marketing at Nexio.
Great, thank you. Christina?
Hi, everyone. I'm Christina Hadart. I'm a creative operations and digital asset management specialist. I'm a freelance consultant based in the UK, supporting creative operations teams, marketing teams, and brands around the world to get the right tech processes, data, and people in place.
Excellent. And Bree?
Hey, everyone. I'm Bree Pegham, VP of Product at Imogen. We do clever, smart content management solutions. So very excited to talk to you today about the future of AI.
Thank you very much. I'd like to kick off with a relatively straightforward question. And maybe I'll address this one to you, Bree. Should people in creative operations be frightened or excited about AI?
I think if you've seen any of the sci-fi movies, I think there's always going to be a little bit of fear about computers taking over, but no, I see it really as an opportunity to kind of change the way that we work. It's not really about replacing jobs; it's about replacing tasks. Things that are automated, mean that you free up time to do the more value-add creative work. So I'm really excited about the opportunities that it can present.
Great, thank you. So machine learning and AI may be the future, but according to Mark Ritson, the famously outspoken marketing professor and columnist, according to him, it may be the future, but it's still pretty dumb. And so, I kind of go along with that, because if AI is so clever, why does Amazon suggest stuff that I've already bought? And why does Apple give me the Prodigy when I want piano chill out? And why does Facebook keep serving me funeral ads? But maybe don't answer the last one. So is it dumb or is it intelligent? Alan, perhaps you'd like to take this one?
I don't think it's dumb, but it's not fully intelligent yet. It's early days. It's a bit like my grandkids, my grandkids are 4 and 6 and they're learning every day. And I think that's where AI is. I think it's still at elementary school. But I want to also sort of pick up on Bree's point. AI is not something to be scared of. AI is not a tool to replace people. AI is a tool to work with. The point of AI is to really automate the repetitive processes, do the 95% of the stuff that's busy work that we end up doing to free us. So we're spending more than 5% of our time being creative. We're spending more and more of our time. AI can really help us be more creative by taking a lot of the drudgery away and doing it at a speed and scale that we couldn't do before. And that's where sort of we're in the early stages of machine learning. Systems are starting to be able to recognize things, do pattern recognition, be able to recognize, facial recognition, all that sort of stuff that we're talking about. It's getting better and better and better. Yes, we may still get mistakes. We were talking a little bit before we came online, about voice assistants. Voice assistants used to be considered AI, but we don't talk about them in that term anymore because it's gotten more sophisticated and we use it every day. But there are still problems with that. It has problems with accents. It has problems with colloquialisms. But we're getting better and better. We're constantly learning and we're constantly improving. And as humans, we're teaching it more and more to do more and more of the repetitive tasks. So why does it get it wrong? It gets it wrong for a couple of reasons. One, we're really in the process of actually building the algorithms and understanding. And it also gets it wrong because we don't actually engineer and manage the content and put the right meta tagging and metadata around the content for AI to be able to understand it. it's the old garbage in, garbage out. If you don't prepare the content or you don't prepare the assets to be used by AI, then you're going to get bad results. And so you can't always blame the AI. Sometimes it's what it's been fed. And sometimes it's just the fact the algorithm isn't mature enough. So it's getting there. So teach it like your grandkids and keep teaching it and working with it, you know? So.
Okay, and it sounds like AI isn't intelligent when humans aren't being intelligent in the way that they set it up.
Exactly, yes. Yeah.
Okay. Christina, what's your perspective on this?
Yeah, I think a lot like what Alan's saying about think about AI like a child. I think there's different generations of AI, right? Artificial intelligence isn't something that is not one thing. It's thousands, millions of different programs out there. So, you know, something like YouTube creating automatic captions from a video. That's something that I think a lot of us take for granted now. We expect it to be able to do that, and it does it pretty well. So in most cases, we're pretty happy with it. So we don't really think about that as AI anymore. But what annoys us is when, like you said, the algorithms don't really work and they're not totally fine-tuned. And that's when we notice it. That's the only time we kind of think, oh, hey, hang on, something's not right here. You know, it's telling me to buy this cat food and I don't own a cat, you know? So it's those kind of things that I think are really interesting. And I expect that that's going to keep happening, right? So, you know, eventually, yes, the Amazon algorithm is going to be smart enough to tell you exactly what you want. Maybe it'll even predict what you might want, but there's going to be something else after that something else interesting that AI can do, and it won't be perfect.
I think it is a lot about expectation setting and what you hope to achieve. I remember reading a couple of years ago about the expectation of chatbots, and if you knew that it wasn't really a human, you would treat it in a certain way and you would expect it to only be so helpful. And if we think about it as augmenting and assisting instead of replacing, then it's easier to be a bit more forgiving when it's not 100%. You know, it's not just a child, it's maybe in the workforce more like an intern or a trainee, someone that's very new on the job that doesn't have the experience to make decisions and needs a lot of coaching, needs a lot of training, to Alan's point. So it's just about kind of managing your expectations of how smart it can actually be.
Yeah, I think Christina made the good point about, you know, AI is not just one thing. You know, it's a multitude of things, and it covers chatbots, it covers content, it covers content creation in writing, it covers content creation in imagery and video. And I was reading something the other day, really scary process where some retailer was basically looking at AI to work with their closed circuit TV cameras in the store, and running facial recognition. So by the time you get to the checkout desk, the assistant knows who you are and knows your purchase order, which on one hand is really cool, and on the other hand is really scary. You know, but again, very looking at how we can take this sort of stuff and get it to do things to help us, rather than, it's not about replacing us, it's really about helping us, and it's really about freeing things up. But the way we're using it, I think there's still a lot of question marks around that. So, but it isn't one thing. There is no one thing that is AI, despite what the movies will tell us.
So from a creative perspective, you just mentioned script writing, and I know the last time that I looked at an AI script, I thought, yeah, I think that's one we'll file under B for bin. But what's your perspective on this?
Again, very early stages. One is somebody who actually writes stuff and does scripting and writes fiction outside of work. I'm not worried about it, because again, you know, I use programs and stuff to help me lay out scripts and lay out things. But in terms of the human being able to take those pieces of information and spin a story around it, I think AI is a long way away from enabling us. AI is really good at doing things like automated sports reporting. Unfortunately, AI has sort of killed the sports reporter, particularly in results. Okay. You know, a lot of sports reports you see are completely generated by AI because they're just pulling statistics and stuff. So they're manipulating data. For that, they're really good. But for true creativity, not yet. No, I think we've got a long way to go.
Okay, so there are possibly, I guess, 4 areas of creative operations that AI could affect. One might be production automation. Another might be in data-driven asset adaptation and deployment, possibly even creation. In the management of creative operations, for example, resource management is a daily, minute-by-minute challenge in creative operations. And for potentially perhaps, of the creative idea generation and selection process. So what are your views? Maybe I'll go to Bree for this one, first of all. What are your views on how advanced the use of AI is in each of these areas? And is there a blinding obvious area that I've actually missed out from my little list of 4 there?
Nothing springs to mind as missing or just there's no real gap there. I think the maturity does vary across these areas. If you think about production automation, there's probably a lot there. There's a lot of workflows out there that have been set up and people have been using for decades, and that goes a long way in ingesting content quickly, getting content distributed very easily. I think that's probably somewhere we don't even really think about it as AI anymore, to Alan's point. Data-driven asset adaptation, I think that to me is in earlier stages, being able to get feedback from what's going well, testing it out in the market, getting to understand how people react to it, A/B testing, that kind of stuff, and then being able to quickly modify what you're doing. That's probably kind of early to mid stages. The management, there's some stuff that you see with calendarizing information and doing some kind of KPI calculations, which is probably a bit more mature. But that's really, there's a lot of data available, whether it's very insightful. I think there's still a ways to go on making that data a bit smarter and really answering questions, not just providing more information, which people don't have time to process. And I think that the most probably exciting frontier is kind of in the idea generation and how you can start to leapfrog some of the more mundane steps of prototyping and data synthesis to actually get to the time where you can have that kind of 5% of novelty, because you've freed up the kind of mind share.
Yeah, great, thank you. I've got a question here from the audience. Somebody who's trying to get buy-in for some creative automation. What's the most compelling argument? Maybe this is one for you, Christina.
Yeah, so when you're thinking about the ROI or the business case for automation, I think, or AI, I think there's a couple of things to think about. One is the difference between automation and AI, right? So automation is a process that's put into place with a series of rules, right? And that's something that you can pretty easily show an ROI for. There's a lot of efficiency there. There's cost savings. There's the need to spend less on producing content that already exists within your organization because it's a lot easier to find it. And then there's AI, which is a little bit more of the innovative side of things. It's trying to simulate how humans think, right? And that's a slightly different kind of tech. So depending on what sort of, if you're building this business case to buy some tech that's going to either automate your processes or help you with your creative processes, then it's really about thinking about what's it going to do and how is it going to save us money, right? I mean, one of the things that we heard in the keynote this morning was that it was Pablo from Wunderman Thompson, just after he was talking about, the need to consider zero budgeting?
Zero-based budgeting.
Zero-based budgeting, right. So we've got to justify every step of our process. And here you can really justify your process by simply doing some measurements on how much is this going to save us in terms of time and cost, and also data. So there's a lot of return on investment in data these days. A lot of us forget to measure that, but as was said many, many years ago, data is the new oil. So don't forget about measuring your data as well. Yeah, that's where I would start. But Bree and Alan, you might have a different perspective on that.
No, I think you're right, but I would say one of the things I'm always cautious about is justifying something on a cost-saving basis, because if you do that, then it comes back to, well, we don't need it anyway, and people get slits shown the door because, oh, you're saving X percent, then for you need 10% less people. I think it's much better if you can actually link it to business revenue generation. Show that by being more efficient, you can generate more revenue. Just for a sort of practical example, we have a client who's a hotel chain. When they open a new hotel, they send photographers in and video people in to take thousands of pictures of a hotel, which they then want to put on the website. They were doing that. Basically, they were coming back with thousands of pictures, and they had people who were basically manually going through saying, this is a bedroom, this is a conference room, this is the bar, this is the lobby, blah, 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 blah. It would actually take them so long that it would delay, people going through the photographs would delay the opening of the hotel because they couldn't get the website up quick enough. Okay. So that was delaying the opening of a hotel that was ready to receive guests by as long as 3 weeks, which is a lot of lost revenue. By applying machine learning and AI and using those people to be the subject matter experts and teach the AI, we can now get a hotel up online within a day because they can go through thousands of photographs in minutes or seconds in some cases. And it's actually more accurate because the humans, if it was a picture of a meeting room, would they call it a meeting room? Would they call it a conference room? Would they call it a boardroom? Is it a bedroom? Is it a guest room? So there was going back to my thing about you have to engineer the content.
Yes.
And using machine learning and AI made it more consistent. So they could, I've lost the word, but basically they could justify that investment on the fact that they could generate revenue for the hotel quicker. And it was actually an improved customer experience because they were delivering things on a consistent basis. So find where there's a hiccup in the revenue generation and how you can solve that with your automation or your AI, and focus in on that rather than cost saving would be my advice. So.
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's a value-driven argument, and it's value-driven by improvement rather than attrition, if you like. Yeah, great. That's really helpful. Thank you very much. I have another question here. How do you get the right balance between AI and human power?
Can I jump in?
Maybe Alan? Yeah.
I think I don't know if I use the expression. We have an expression at Nuxeo, keeping the human in the loop when it comes to AI. We're very strong on that. With actually our AI offering, we actually have a human in the loop part of it, where we gamify people to actually teach the AI. We bring back certain results. Is this the right t-shirt for the right brand? Is this a summer t-shirt? Is it a short sleeve t-shirt? Just throw up random results from the AI and have the subject matter experts go through and say, yes, no, this is right, this is wrong. I say it all comes down to, as I said, making sure that AI is not a replacement. AI is a tool that you work alongside. So just make sure that when you're thinking about an AI process and you're thinking about AI strategy, how can the humans work with it? How can you free up people to be more creative? But also how can those people, that their expertise be helped to use to teach the AI and get the two to work in parallel? It's not an either or discussion. It should never be an either or discussion.
It's really sorry.
Go ahead.
It's really it's a balance, I think, of art and science. Margaret Bowden, who's a Coxeye professor at University of Sussex, said 95% of what professional artists in science do is exploratory and 5% is transformational creativity. And so maybe that's quite high, 80, 20, 95, 5, but the idea that you could accelerate through that more mundane and really have the time to do something that's quite novel and quite unique, that's really what you should be focusing on. And to the last point about, how do you justify that cost? that's really what you're trying to open up. You're trying to make that 5% more like 20% of your time. And if you can expand that, that's where the real transformation happens.
That's really interesting because, as you know, John Smith at IBM has said that it's easy for AI to come up with something novel just randomly, but it's very hard to come up with something that is novel and unexpected and useful. I'm not sure. Do you have a perspective on that? And have you seen actual evidence to the contrary?
I think this is pretty fun, right? Because on the surface of it, I think I would totally agree that AI, it doesn't have a conscience, right? It's a machine. It doesn't have the emotion. How could it possibly come up with something novel or something that's not random? Or sorry, something that's novel rather than totally random or just based on the thousands of inputs that you've given it, right? But actually, so my background is as an environmental scientist. And so I studied ecology and evolution, got my master's degree at the ETH in Zurich. And, you know, a fundamental part about thinking about evolution is that evolution is simply, you know, centuries and longer geological time frames of DNA mutating, reproducing, recombining in different ways. And sometimes, very rarely, but sometimes, those regenerations and mutations can result in a new species. And if you think about it that way, I think, okay, well, actually, if I think about AI in the same sense, maybe most of the time, you know, 99.99% of the time, what AI is producing isn't going to be something totally new or creative. But maybe that 0.0001% of the time, it will create something totally different, something we've never seen before, kind of almost like a bit of a fluke, but in a way, that's what new species are, a bit of a fluke. So I quite like it that way.
Excellent. Thank you. Alan, do you have a perspective here on this this topic?
No, I actually really like Christina's evolution analogy.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it?
Yeah, it was great. Yeah. So, no, that was very thoughtful.
Okay.
Well, it's funny, Christina, I didn't know you also have an environmental science background. That's what my undergrad degree is in. And I do think, I do think in terms of evolutions, I think that's a really elegant way of thinking about it. And if you look at Paul Jarosky's work on the evolution of new markets and how nothing really comes from an original idea, that everything is always stemming off of something that's come before. You know, there are examples from the Rutgers Art and AI Lab where they're trying to create stylistic ambiguity and putting two systems in opposition to one another to try to come up with sort of balanced novelty. It's something that is unique but allows for a little bit of control for the computer to kind of come up with its own way of interpreting it. And it doesn't seem to me inauthentic. It's really how we work. We're always putting two new ideas together. So I think there's lots of potential for something that is both novel and practical.
Amazing. Thank you. Another question from the audience. For something like facial or object recognition, do you have to teach AI systems completely from scratch, or can they access some kind of centralized source of data to get things started?
Maybe I can take that one. I mean, literally from day one, yes, somebody has to teach them from day one, but where we are now, no, because there are a lot of generic services out there that already have built that corpus of knowledge of what something is. So, you know, if you use one of the generic services, it will recognize something as a red truck. But what it may not do is recognize it as your particular brand with a particular set of wheels on it, which, so you as a business have to teach it the specific things that apply to your business, but there is a very large corpus of basic data out there that a lot of the generic services, the plugin services that you can get on the web already do. So, you know, a lot of, you're talking about facial recognition, celebrity facial recognition. There are engines out there that are already for it. But if you actually want to do facial recognition of your employees, then you're going to have to teach it what your employees look like. So, you know, and again, it's that maturity thing. You just have to keep building the knowledge on top of it and training it and so forth. So there are good starting points out there, but if you want to do something very specific to your business, you have to teach it that information that you need.
Okay. And going back to my original question, a member of the audience has asked, will AI have creative ops teams out of a job one day?
I mean,
Anybody like to comment further on that one?
Yeah, because so Bree and Alan have already mentioned a little bit about kind of the idea that AI is really only augmenting human creativity. It's not going to replace it. And I don't see it replacing it anytime soon. But I think the great thing is that, especially from a creative operations standpoint, it's going to take a lot of that tedious manual work out of the process that we currently do, right? So the dream is that we have all these amazing automated, streamlined processes where we don't have to go out and do lots of, you know, picture research or video research. You know, that the system does it for us, or it delivers the content to the right people at the right time without us having to get involved in the data. I mean, that's the dream, right? So I think this is a really exciting thing. And if anything, it's giving creative operations more leverage and more value and importance within businesses, because without the creative operations teams, without all of you out there listening right now, I mean, the companies aren't going to be able to do this. They're not going to be able to find the right AI tools to help them with their problems and implement them in a way that is actually more efficient than their current processes.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely right. It's about liberating creative operations to focus on the things that Niels was talking about this morning, which is the, you know, really exciting face of creative operations. So if some of the mundane parts can be, if people can be liberated from that, then it gives them more time. So I think from what you're saying, there's a strong argument that AI is going to empower creative operations people rather than disenfranchise them. Yeah, excellent. Okay, so we're talking about we're mentioning creativity here, and I'm wondering, I meant, you know, we talked earlier about some scripts we've seen generated by AI, but how long will it be before the first AI creative ad wins a medal at Cannes, do you think?
I guess that depends on what you mean by AI created. So let me give another practical example. We have a sports apparel customer who, when the lockdown happened and all sports were cancelled, they used AI to go in and mine 4,000 hours of video that they already had to actually create a brand new ad, which has got already about how sports would carry on, and was all in it together, and all. It was very on brand, and it got a lot of buzz, and it's getting a lot of. But was that created by AI? It was, in the sense. I mean, the visuals weren't created by the AI, but that ad was created by AI, and the fact that they could use AI to go mine the 4,000 hours to put together a 28-second video. So, as I said, it depends what you mean by created by AI. Now, in terms of something wholly created out of, you know, AI cloth in terms of the visuals and things, I think we've got a long way to go. And somebody still, even if AI is creating it, still somebody has to at least give it, I don't know, a through line, a point. Somebody has to put in the information of what's the message, what we're trying to sell, to let it to go away and pull the pieces together. So again, I think AI is a very fluid definition, and we have to be very careful about how we use it. So.
Okay, thank you. A question for probably each of you will have an answer to this, again from the audience. So what new use of AI have you been really wowed by the most over the last year? So maybe starting with you, Bree.
I think the applications that we talked about earlier, you know, that the automative parts, I think they're unsexy. They're, you know, it's just making your life a little bit easier. I think the augmenting the creative process and some of that leapfrogging and using that as an inspiration, using it to prototype some of the works that's going on. You know, Christie sold an AI created painting for $430,000. And it's, you know, back to the question about the can, you know, is it because it was created by AI that it's really interesting, or that we don't think that it can be quality? I think it raises a lot of questions of, you know, subjectively about what is good and what is high quality. And to me, it's really an interesting one that you can use that as a jumping off point, because as Alan said time and again, you know, it's only as good as the training data. It's only as good as the direction and the guidance that you give it. So to say that it's created by a computer isn't entirely true. It's created by the people that work with the computer. So that's an area to me that's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. Katrina?
Yeah, there's a new area that is terrifying me, but also got me really excited, called synthetic media. I don't know if anybody's heard of this, but it's kind of like building fake people or synthetic people. And you can do it with all sorts of things. It doesn't have to be people, but some of the examples that I've seen recently are mind-blowing. So basically these algorithms can take images of real people and take thousands or hundreds and thousands of them and basically mush them all together and create a fake person. And what you can do is you can tell the system, I want a little girl who's 5 years old with her two parents from a certain ethnic descent. And then this model can output those people for you, and they look like real people. They don't look computer generated at all. And then take it a step further. You think, okay, if I had this kind of tool, I could, you know, put that person into my brand ad, and I wouldn't need to go and get consent forms, hire models. You know, I don't have any of those issues. Don't need to do any of the on-site production. There's so many amazing kind of AI elements now where you can get the lighting right? So the lighting of the people, of these fake people, matches the lighting in the background. So really exciting stuff. Also really terrifying, because imagine if this gets into the wrong hands and people use it to, you know, make inappropriate things or use it in a controversial way to, you know, undermine society. So lots of exciting things, but I think there will be some interesting regulations that come out relating to AI too.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Alan.
I was going to say my biggest wow moment is nowhere near as exciting as leading edge as the two previous ones, but one that really got me to we were talking earlier about facial recognition and machine learning and stuff like that. Is working on a project with again a fashion company where we were going through and using AI to do facial recognition of the models and so forth. And the AI started to come back with, a photograph that was taken from behind where you actually couldn't see the model's face. And it was like, oh, this is this particular model. And we were like, how did it figure that out? There was no facial recognition. And it worked it out because of the clothes she was wearing. It was like, okay, she's wearing these clothes with that background. So I've got other photographs that were taken on the same photo shoot where I can see her face. Therefore, I'm making that intuitive leap that it's the same model. You know, I'm sort of 85% certain that this is the same model based on these other. And coming out of that, it also started to actually recognize who the photographer was because of the camera angles and the lighting and the particular stylish things that photographers did. So it's starting to make the data connections, but it's building this web of data and doing more than we necessarily asked it to, and it's learning more. And for me, that was a wow moment when it came back and said, oh, I'm 85% certain this is Millie, Millie the model, just based on what she's wearing and the background and the time of day, because I've got 85 other photographs from that same photo shoot. And that was a bit of a wow moment for me. It was starting to make those connections. So.
Amazing. I have a question from the audience here, and it's I think it's a deceptively simple question. How can we successfully onboard and adopt an AI tool? Open to any of you.
I'm going to go back to my earlier answer. Find a business problem and use AI to solve it.
Yeah,
that's a big ask, but it's a simple summary of how, yeah, prove real value. Don't just do it for the sake of doing it because it's cool technology. Solve a business problem with it.
Yeah, if you ever think that you're spending too much time on something, or you think that there's probably a way to jump a few steps, that's a good time to see if there's a technology to address it.
Great. Christina?
Yeah, just something that I've similarly related, but kind of after you've decided, okay, we want to buy this piece of AI, how do you get it adopted and how do you actually get people to use it? I think is something that is often overlooked, right? So any of these tools that we have in creative operations, they're not kind of plug and play tools. You don't just buy them, turn them on and job done. You know, it's make sure that you go back to those original problems and original workflows that Alan and Bree mentioned, make sure it is solving the problem and help people to adopt and onboard and really use that. So going back to kind of change management principles and you know, help people along the way and keep it up.
Yeah. So that's a really interesting area that you've just raised, because as you rightly say, so many software and SaaS services that are provided to creative operations are not plug and play. And they do require very careful introduction and implementation to be a success. Yet there are products out there that are so outside of the creative operations sphere that are so totally intuitive that you can download it and you can use it straight away because it's just there and it just works. So will AI have any role in making creative operations tools any more intuitive and plug and play, do you think?
I hope so. And I think that there's a lot to learn through behavioral analysis that could start to surface the right content at the right time to make predictions about what would be useful for this audience or that audience, to allow you to tailor things to different groups in a way that really is responsive to the individual. I think one of the things that makes me most excited about AI is allowing for that personalization at scale. You know, there's no shortage of work. There's more and more projects to do, and there's more and more expectation to reach individuals and what they particularly are interested in. And that is always, there's going to be more and more jobs that are needed and more people that are needed. I think that's never going to go away, but trying to reach individuals, that's, I think, where AI can really help.
Yeah, I mean, I think all software, all systems have to move towards that more intuitive, because as a consumer every day, you know, with our phones, as you said, and things, that's what we expect. And we expect that as a consumer. Why shouldn't we expect that in the workplace with our jobs? So I think vendors like ourselves and others, you know, have to move in that direction. Yes, you still, you know, a lot of creative ops are very specific to a particular organization or the way they work. So maybe you have to configure it a little bit up front, but the actual day-to-day usage to help the adoption, I think, has to move to being more. And I mentioned earlier, where, you know, with our AI human in the loop interface, we're making that more gamified and something that you can do on your phone when you're sitting in, you know, in line at Starbucks. You can get on your phone and do a quick mission, as we call it, and figure out, you know, help the AI. So you've got to start thinking in those terms. The days of having very complex UIs at work, I think, have to go away, because we have a very different environment as customers, and we don't switch mindset when we go to work as to what's acceptable and what isn't. So I think, yeah.
Everything's like Google, right? It's easy.
Yeah, the interface is a single line. Yeah. So.
Exactly. Wouldn't that be nice? No, I think back to Bree's earlier point, I think something that in terms of AI and system usability, that the chatbots are a really great idea, and done right, they can really help to scale onboarding and training for these sort of tools. I worked with a client where it was myself and one other person, and we had 15,000 users. And now there's no way that we would be able to, onboard every single person, contact them to say, do you have any more questions, or even be available at the right time when they needed to get answers quickly. So maybe the chatbots are the answer, or maybe there's something else coming after chatbots that are going to be even better.
I think you actually just one of the two most important words there. It's scale and speed. I think that's where AI can really help drive, is the ability to do things at a bigger scale and much faster.
It could be said that the term AI ops has been kind of firmly claimed by the IT industry. How close do you think we are to AI creative ops being a term that will be used in our day-to-day work in creative operations? Maybe one for you, Bree?
Sure. To me, this is, I think it's putting AI as a preface is an ephemeral term, much like we used to put E before everything to signify that it was digital or online. I think it helps people manage the transition, but at a certain point it will fall away, and it will just be part of the quotidian, and you won't even think about it as AI. And so it may come and go, but I wouldn't expect the term to last very long.
Thank you. I have a final question, and this is something it's a really challenging area of creative operations. Resource management is a role which is it's a flat-out role. It starts as soon, if you're in that role, you start the moment you walk into the office, and it does not stop until you leave the office. You're constantly balancing variables such as budget, effort, duration, capabilities, expertise, teamwork, demand, capacity, and even personalities, to name but a few, multiple times every hour of every day. It seems to me that this is an area where people often rely on spreadsheets to manage that process, and often they use spreadsheets in frustration with the perhaps limited capabilities of some of the online resource management tools. Other people are very comfortable with some of the online management tools, but it seems to be an area that's ripe for AI to kind of step in and help make the whole process a bit smoother and more easy to manage, and therefore help businesses get even better work from their people, and perhaps reduce pressure on their people. So I'd be fascinated in the last couple of minutes, and just a few views on that from the panel, please. Anybody care to step in on that one?
I'll step in on that one. I think it comes down to a lot of what we talked about using AI to eliminate the repetitive. What I was talking earlier about, AI starting to make some what might seem to be intuitive connections. I think you can use AI to, start to make those connections across your various databases, your personnel records, and if you're doing photo shoots, sample management and all the, making sure that you've got the right equipment, and they're probably, all that information is probably out there, and it's probably siloed in various systems, and the resource manager knows all that, and it's in their head, but maybe you can make those connections using AI, and then free them up to do the hardest part of the job, which is managing the personalities. That's where you need the human interface. That's where you need the empathy. That's where you need the intuition. So again, I think it just comes down to what we've talked about a lot, which is using AI as a tool to get help with the repetitive stuff and do the data manipulation and free up people to do what you actually pay them for, which in that role is to manage the talent. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Alan, Bree, Christina, for some really interesting discussion there. I'm sure it would have been incredibly helpful for our audience. It's an area that we're all trying to learn about. So that was fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed.